Okay, another shootout. On the left we've got a Surface Laptop 7 from Microsoft. This is a Copilot PC, Snapdragon X Elite processor and 16 gigs of RAM. On the right we've got a Surface Pro 9, also a Copilot machine with a Snapdragon X Pro this time, also with 16 gigs of RAM. Now fairly evenly matched because my understanding is these are both systems on a chip. The Snapdragon processor is an SoC, which means that the part of the processor that's dealing with the emulation required for FL Studio running on ARM, because it's not native, is the same on both these chips. So let's test that by kicking them off and see how we get on. The first reading I'll give you will be the Surface Laptop on the left as a percentage of processing power used by the app, and the second one will be the Surface Pro on the right. So off the gates, we're both looking at 15% versus 15%, 16% versus 17%, 19% versus 18%, 17 versus 17, so pretty much evenly matched so far. 18% versus 18%, 17 versus 16%. We need probably to wait until the faster section of the music, which is coming up, which puts the processors under a little bit more stress. 16% versus 16%, so completely evenly matched as anticipated, and probably will be the end result, but let's let the processors speak for themselves. 19% versus 17% at that point, just before we go into the faster section. 18% versus 18%. 21% versus 21%, 16% versus 16%, starting to ramp up now. We're going into the section you'll probably see on the display. So we've hit it at 26% versus 23%. So interestingly, the letter of the processor is saying it's working slightly less hard. 24% versus 24%, so even Stevens, so they've matched each other up. And that may be down to just caching differences on these platforms. 23% versus 27% now, 26% versus 24%, 37% versus 31%, that's a jump there, but now back to 35% versus 30%, 32% versus 28%. Now in general, that's interesting, the Surface Pro with the Snapdragon X Pro chip having to work less hard, although not very little in it. 29% versus 29%, so back to even Stevens at that point. 27% versus 27%. Let's call it there. I don't want to waste any more of your time. Pretty much even Stevens. The Surface Pro putting in a great challenge, if you want to call it that, and some of the readings were slightly ahead for the Surface Pro, but overall evenly matched as expected. So the Snapdragon X Elite not really making any difference as far as emulation is concerned would be my takeaway. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, give it a like. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you'd like to see more, then subscribe and hit the notification bell. Okay, thanks very much for your time.